Today we're taking a look at the road to World War II, trying to really understand those pivotal events. And especially for our Italian listeners out there, we want to see how Italy played a part in this whole thing.
Sounds complicated.
It is, it really is. But we've got a great guide for this journey. We'll be using a lecture by an Italian historian to help us unpack it all.
That's fantastic. I always find it fascinating to get those different perspectives on such major historical events.
Absolutely. And whether you're learning Italian or just fascinated by history like me, I think there's something here for everyone.
Definitely. So where do we begin? 1939 with the invasion of Poland.
To really understand World War II, we need to rewind a bit further, all the way back to 1919 and the Treaty of Versailles.
Ah, the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty that was supposed to bring peace after World War I. But as we know, it didn't quite work out that way, did it?
Not exactly. It's almost ironic. The Treaty of Versailles, while aiming for peace, kind of laid the groundwork for the next global conflict.
It's like trying to fix a broken vase with more glue. You might hold it together for a while, but those cracks are still there just waiting to spread.
That's a great analogy. So tell me a little bit more about how this treaty actually contributed to the rise of tensions across Europe.
Think about it. Almost every nation involved in World War I walked away from that treaty feeling cheated. Italy, even though they were on the winning side, felt like they'd gotten a raw deal.
That's right, the mutilated victory, as they called it.
Exactly. They gained some territory, sure, but it wasn't what they believed they deserved for their sacrifices during the war. This feeling of resentment wasn't unique to Italy, though.
No, definitely not. And when we talk about resentment, Germany's experience with the Treaty of Versailles is a prime example. They faced extremely harsh consequences.
Oh, absolutely. Germany was forced to take the blame for the war, cede large chunks of their territory, and pay heavy reparations. Their military was drastically reduced, too.
All of which contributed to this deep sense of humiliation among the German people, right?
Exactly. And that humiliation, coupled with the severe economic hardship they were facing, it created a perfect breeding ground for extremist ideologies to take root.
And that's where the Nazi Party, led by Adolf Hitler, enters the picture.
Hitler was a master at exploiting that discontent, that feeling of being wronged. He promised to restore Germany to its former glory, to overturn the Treaty of Versailles and make Germany strong again.
He offered a scapegoat for Germany's problems and a vision of a powerful, unified Germany. So his rise to power in 1933, that really signaled a dangerous shift in the European landscape.
Without a doubt. And it's here that we start to see what historians often refer to as a double illusion at play.
A double illusion. What does that mean exactly?
On the one hand, you had the democratic powers like England and France. They were operating under the illusion that they could appease Hitler.
Appease him, meaning what? Giving in to some of his demands in the hope that it would prevent another war.
Precisely. They thought they could give him a little here, a little there, and that would somehow satisfy his ambitions and keep the peace.
A very dangerous miscalculation, as we know.
Oh, absolutely. And on the other side of this double illusion was Hitler himself.
What was his illusion?
Hitler was convinced that he could reclaim lost territories, expand Germany's power, and ultimately dominate Europe without facing any serious consequences.
He underestimated the resolve of the other nations and overestimated his own ability to control the situation.
Exactly. And early on, the lack of strong opposition to his moves only served to embolden him further.
So let's follow this dangerous path. Let's see how Hitler's expansionist ambitions started to play out, beginning with the annexation of Austria in March 1938.
Austria, with its majority German-speaking population, was an easy first target. Hitler used political pressure, threats of military action, and even staged incidents to create a pretext for what he called a reunification with Germany.
And the world just watched as German troops marched into Austria, met not with resistance, but with cheers from those who supported the Nazi ideology.
It was a moment that really exposed the weakness of the international community. There was condemnation, sure, but no real action taken to stop Hitler.
And that inaction, of course, only served to embolden him further, right?
Absolutely. It reinforced his belief that he could continue pushing the boundaries without facing any serious repercussions.
So the stage was set for further aggression. And Hitler, emboldened by his success in Austria, turned his attention next to Czechoslovakia, specifically the Sudetenland, a region with a large German population.
The Sudetenland crisis is a textbook example of how propaganda can be used to manipulate events and create a pretext for conflict.
In what way?
The Nazis launched this massive propaganda campaign, portraying ethnic Germans in Czechoslovakia as being oppressed and in need of protection from the Czech government.
It's incredible how history can be twisted to serve political agendas.
It's frightening, really. And this narrative of oppression, it fueled tensions and gave Hitler the excuse he needed to intervene.
And this all culminated in the Munich Conference in September of 1938, right?
Yes. The Munich Conference is a pivotal moment. Picture this. The fate of Czechoslovakia being decided by England, France, Italy, and Germany, without Czechoslovakia even being present at the table.
It's almost unbelievable that such a major decision was made without involving the very country at the heart of the dispute.
It was a desperate attempt to avoid war at any cost. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, he was the driving force behind this appeasement policy. He believed that by giving Hitler what he wanted, they could preserve peace.
So at this conference, Chamberlain agreed to cede the Sudetenland to Germany and famously returned to England, waving a piece of paper declaring he had achieved peace for our time.
Peace for our time. A tragically misguided statement, as we know.
It was a short-lived victory, if you can even call it that. Did Hitler stop with the Sudetenland?
Of course not. He saw the Munich Agreement as a sign of weakness. It only confirmed his belief that the democracies lacked the willpower to stand up to him. It just fueled his ambitions for further expansion. And so, Hitler, emboldened by his success in Czechoslovakia, sets his sights on a new target: Danzig.
Danzig. This city had a largely German population, but after World War I, it was separated from Germany and placed under the control of the League of Nations.
And for Hitler, this was unacceptable. He demanded the return of Danzig to Germany. This is what became known as the Polish question.
And this demand for Danzig, this really marked a turning point. How did Poland react? Did they give in to Hitler's demands like we saw with Austria and Czechoslovakia?
Poland was different. They refused to back down. They knew that appeasement hadn't worked, that giving in to Hitler would only embolden him further and put their own independence at risk.
So Poland decided to stand their ground. You can sense that tension, that feeling that the world is holding its breath, wondering what will happen next. How did England and France respond? They had, after all, chosen appeasement before.
This time, they knew they couldn't ignore the threat. England and France offered Poland a guarantee of support, a promise to come to their aid if Germany attacked. But even then, their commitment was somewhat hesitant.
They were still hoping to avoid a full-blown war.
Exactly. They still believed that maybe somehow a diplomatic solution could be found. But while all this was happening, another major power was watching these events unfold very closely: the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin.
Ah, the Soviet Union. What role did they play in this incredibly complex web of alliances and tensions?
Stalin was a shrewd strategist. He was driven by the desire to protect Soviet interests and expand their influence, and he saw an opportunity in this crisis.
In what way?
The Western powers, England and France, they had initially excluded Stalin from the negotiations. They deeply distrusted his communist regime.
They were afraid of him, weren't they? Afraid of what he might do.
Yes, but they were also worried about the possibility of a German-Soviet alliance, an alliance that could completely change the balance of power in Europe.
So Stalin was in a very powerful position. He was being courted by both sides. Did he side with the Western powers?
Not exactly. He decided to play a much more cunning game. He started engaging in separate negotiations with both Germany and the Western allies, all at the same time.
He was keeping his options open, waiting to see which side would offer him the best deal.
Precisely. It was a high-stakes game of poker, and Stalin was a master player. But as all of this was happening, there was another player in this drama that we can't forget about: Italy.
Italy, of course, was allied with Germany under the Pact of Steel, signed by Hitler and Mussolini. So they were obligated to support Germany, right?
In theory, yes. But the reality was much more complicated. Mussolini had growing concerns about Italy's ability to fight a major war.
Italy wasn't ready.
Not at all. They were still recovering from previous conflicts. Their military equipment was outdated. Their economy was struggling. Mussolini knew that Italy needed time to prepare.
So while they were publicly proclaiming their unwavering support for Germany, behind the scenes they were scrambling, weren't they? Trying to buy themselves some time. What happened next? Did this diplomatic maneuvering, did it work? Was anyone able to prevent the inevitable?
The summer of 1939 was a tense time. There were escalating border incidents between Germany and Poland, diplomatic efforts were failing, and a sense of dread was growing across Europe. It was becoming clear that war was almost unavoidable.
So what was the final trigger? What was the event that finally pushed the world over the edge?
On August 23rd, 1939, something happened that shocked the world. Stalin, in a stunning move, signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler.
The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, as it was known.
Mm-hmm.
A pact between Nazi Germany and the Communist Soviet Union. It seemed impossible.
It certainly surprised many, and secret protocols within the pact were even more alarming. They included an agreement to divide Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, essentially giving Hitler a free hand to invade Poland.
It was a betrayal, wasn't it? Stalin's decision to align with Hitler sealed Poland's fate.
It was a calculated move by Stalin, a way to secure Soviet interests, at least in the short term. But for Poland, it was a catastrophe.
And for the world, it was the final step on the road to war.
With the non-aggression pact in place, Hitler knew that he could invade Poland without fear of Soviet intervention. The countdown to war had begun.
So the stage is set for conflict. The pieces are in place. Tell me about those final days before the outbreak of war. What happened?
In the last days of August 1939, a frantic flurry of diplomatic activity took place. England and France, desperate to avoid war, urged Poland to negotiate with Hitler.
But deep down, they must have known that negotiation was unlikely to succeed. Hitler was determined to take Poland.
Precisely. And while diplomats scrambled, Hitler was putting the finishing touches on his invasion plans, preparing to unleash a new form of warfare on the world: the Blitzkrieg.
The Blitzkrieg, a lightning war, a tactic based on speed, surprise, and overwhelming force.
And to create a pretext for his invasion, Hitler used another tactic: propaganda.
Propaganda. How did he use that?
One example is the Gleiwitz incident. It was a staged attack on a German radio station by operatives disguised as Polish soldiers.
A false flag operation.
Exactly. It was a carefully orchestrated act of deception designed to create the illusion of Polish aggression and give Hitler a justification for war.
A chilling example of how easily truth can be manipulated, especially in times of tension and conflict.
Absolutely. And so with the world watching, with the stage set, and with a fabricated excuse in hand, Hitler launched his attack.
At dawn on September 1st, 1939, German forces stormed across the Polish border. World War II had begun.
It's strange to think about, isn't it? While the world is being thrown into chaos, Italy's just kind of watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, it's a weird situation because technically Italy was allied with Germany. They signed that Pact of Steel. But on the ground, they just weren't ready to jump into another war.
Exactly. They were in no shape to fight. Mussolini knew that. He needed time, he needed more resources, more of everything, really. So he used this delay to see how things played out.
Hoping maybe the conflict would fizzle out, or that he could squeeze some concessions from Hitler in exchange for finally joining the fight.
It's a high-risk strategy, for sure.
High risk, high reward, maybe. While all this is going on, what's happening back in Italy? How are people feeling about all this?
We have to remember the propaganda machine was working overtime, downplaying Polish resistance, blaming the democracies for starting the war, praising Germany. A very calculated attempt to shape public perception.
It's a scary reminder of how quickly information can be manipulated, especially during wartime.
Absolutely. So here we are. We followed this path from the Treaty of Versailles through Hitler's rise, this tangled web of alliances, all of these miscalculations, and it leads us straight to World War II.
It makes you think, doesn't it? About how easily things can spiral out of control. How a desire for peace, for stability can get twisted into something so destructive.
And how dangerous these illusions can be. These leaders, these nations, all thinking they had more control than they did, misjudging intentions, misjudging each other's strength.
And ultimately paying the price. With all this in mind, what can we learn? Why does this period of history still matter to us today?
It's a reminder of how fragile peace really is, how quickly things can change. We have to be aware of the dangers of things like nationalism, appeasement, how easy it is to manipulate information.
Those threats don't disappear, do they? They just change shape, adapt to new circumstances.
Exactly. And I think it's our responsibility to learn from those past mistakes, to be vigilant, to protect those democratic values, to recognize those warning signs before it's too late.
To understand that history doesn't just tell us about the past, it can guide us, right? Help us navigate the challenges we face today. Thank you for taking us on this journey, this deep dive into the path to World War II.
Thank you for having me. And for everyone listening, don't stop here. Keep exploring, keep learning, keep questioning.
It's up to us to use that knowledge to build a better, more peaceful future.